Is this acceptable at your college? Or is this the kind of behavior that you condone?
Okay. All right. So
Is this
What the fuck?
people to surround?
I don't think you're allowed to record footage inside of a college classroom, are you? Like, I think they can kick you out if they want to, no?
Well, the professor can, but if the professor's not kicking him out and the other students don't want you to...
That's kind of weird.
Anybody who wants to stand up in the corner in front of the camera.
Oh, no, the professor encourages all the students to stand up. Okay. Why not? Why doesn't she just get him removed from the class? What is she doing?
All right. So other thing I just wanted to say, I wanted to invite anybody who wants to stand up in the corner in front of the camera is more than welcome to. If we, I know that we had some people who said, I don't want to be filmed, and we've had that. So if we, we can't make them turn off the camera, but if you want to stand up in front of it, that might be an okay thing to do. Okay.
No, it's like a speaker.
Yeah.
Oh, they're doing it, yeah.
Talk about feminism. That's our next. All right.
something to think about is, and I also want to not give.
Is this acceptable?
I never understand this. When you're giving a presentation, you're trying to share an ideology. Don't you want more people to hear about it? I don't understand why people block people out from recording their shit. Like, if I go out and I give a talk somewhere, people fuck recording me. I'm like, this is fucking good shit. I want that shit. It jerks my fucking ego off. I know the more people are gonna hear what I'm gonna have to say. I guess maybe it's a little different because I'm public all the time, but like, what the fuck? I mean, this is somebody that's choosing to put their speech out in a public arena.
At your college, or is this the kind of behavior that you condone?
Why not go rent, then go get a job, make some money, and rent a fucking private auditorium to do it. Don't do it in a public college campus. What the fuck?
All right, so in pairs, you all can also do this exercise. So your job.
They needed to get a man to come and impress them with like his 6'6" privilege. They should have got like a really fucking tall guy to just stand them into. That would have been funny. That would have been privileged as fuck.
We had a question, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
You had a question for the person?
No, I just think it might help the kind of situation, just if he could explain why he's here, or what the filming is for, if it's...
I'm an independent reporter. I'm a blogger.
Yeah.
I run a YouTube channel.
Also right.
Whoa.
Right. So writing about this is great.
So are you just...
Filming it.
Wait, what did she say? She didn't really just say that, did she? Oh no.
Wait, what did she say?
Writing about this is rape. I don't think she said it. Hold on.
So writing about this is great.
So are you just...
Filming it is not, we don't want PCP to film it, and we don't want you to.
Is this an acceptable environment here on your campus?
Destiny, public colleges don't give you the right to record other people's conversations. I guess like if it was a classroom, I would agree with that. But it seems like they've like rented or gotten permission from the college to use this for a public place. Here's my understanding. If you don't have the authority to forcibly remove somebody from an area, which I thought they would, but I guess they don't, then how do you have the authority to tell them not to record is like my question, I guess.
Yes, this is. I'm asking this guy because he's an official for the college.
I'm not.
He doesn't control me.
Well, this guy's a lawyer too.
In being silenced, right? And so we recognize that one of the ways that we center whiteness is that we are silenced by it. So.
You have to get permission to record in most states in a public area? I don't think that's true.
Well, but universities aren't public property.
Aren't they?
No, they're not.
A state university? I'm almost positive is public. Now, if it's a private university, like for a state university, like if I wanted to go...
The grounds of a university, even a public university, are still under laws that are different than the general public.
Is that true?
You cannot bring a firearm, even though licensed...
Sure, I know that. You can. That's the same thing with libraries and whatnot too. You're not allowed to bring a firearm. But like, if I wanted to walk across like the UNO campus, if I was just like walking across, I don't think they could just kick me off.
If you were going around with a camera in a library or whatever, I'm pretty sure they can ask you to be removed if they don't want you to. Because it's not the same as being out and about in the general public.
You don't need permission to record as long as you don't have reasonable expectation of privacy. Yeah, like you couldn't go into like a public bathroom and record, but in terms of just being like in a public area, they've been kicked off their lawn after school hours. Yeah, I know that you can. I know that you can govern public property by certain rules. For instance, even public parks will close at certain hours. You can't go to a public park. I think around here, I think it's like 11. It might even be earlier.
I'm absolutely not wrong.
But I don't know if but in terms of like going to a park and recording, like if I were to go to a public park or like an elementary school or a high school or whatever, and I was like on the grounds, I'm not sure. I don't know. Most states have laws that prevent the recording of conversations unless one of the parties to the conversation states okay. Unless it is a two-party state, you need both parties. Doesn't that pertain more to like phone calls and shit? When you're talking about like one party or two-party state? You can technically record people in their homes as long as the window is open.
Open carry in public spaces is different from open carry on a campus.
I don't think that's true. I don't think you can record people inside their houses. I think that if you make... fuck. I would have to go and look it up.
Concealed carry is absolutely illegal on the University of Texas campus.
If you make a recording publicly down the street, I think that that's like okay. But if you point the camera into somebody's window, like inside their house, I don't think that's okay. I think that that's illegal. I'm getting my info there, I think, though, from The Wire, so that might not necessarily be true everywhere.
I thought if you could see it from a point in the public, so like if you're out on the street as opposed to in their yard, that you still could.
I feel like you're not allowed to.
Like cops will give you a really fucking hard time about it, but they don't. I don't think they technically have anything.
Like if you like record somebody's house like passing by, it's fine. But if you're literally like in the street, like pointing your camera at an open window and like zooming in and staring at it, I don't think you're allowed to do that. But I could be wrong. If your drone flies over your backyard and you suspect it of recording, can you shoot it down? I don't know how far do your property rights extend up into the into the sky.
Not very far.
Okay, esports Batman. Let's call me. Where are you at? I don't know what your name is on Skype. I know you messaged me before, though.
I'm pretty sure if you recording private property that is incidentally like something that you can see from public property is okay, but it's not, like you said, trying to zoom in on stuff like that. But like all of the celebrities all the time in their backyards will get caught like tanning topless and stuff like that, and nothing seems to ever come of them getting protection for that. So
being out in your backyard is different than pointing a camera, I think, like in somebody's window and like staring inside their house. I think that's a different.
Private property.
Yeah, but I think that there's I think that there's a difference between looking into somebody's house.
Really, really tall, because a lot of them will have really tall fences that make it obvious they don't want you looking in the backyard. So you're very obviously doing something intrusive.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
And yet, they never seem to get in trouble for it.
I've never heard anything bad about recording people in like the backyard, but in terms of doing it in houses, it seems like that's a more extreme thing. But not sure.
So what if you have one of those Spanish houses that's like a square, but has like in the middle they have an outdoor area?
Yep.
Does that count as in your house?
They can raid tower all the way up and look down. Did Nathan really never have any ear infection problems? Did I really imagine that? Oh, you made it sound like he had some untreated ear infection for years. That's never ever happened. All of his ear infections have always been treated. Yeah, I don't know if you thought that we just like lock Nathan in the basement when he complains about ear problems and like never treat it. I don't understand.
What were the tubes for?
To help drain his ears.
Oh, okay.
I thought you'd messaged me on Skype before.
Maybe he removed you.
Show me your price list for what? Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up? Nothing much. What's up with you?
Nothing much. Are there different rules that govern like private universities versus state universities, or are they considered?
Well,
like...
yeah. So basically, what happens is the basis is private universities are always going to have the most leeway, but usually when it comes to conversations, where's the? I guess I'll send you the link for the reporters, what they tell reporters, but more or less, it's one thing if you happen to be recording a conversation as you like are walking by and you're like FaceTiming with somebody, versus if you're deliberately trying to record their conversation. And when you have a situation like that, it throws everything into whack because the person that's recording is not a party to the conversation, so they can't get permission to record the conversation. They can't give it themselves. Like in a one-party state, if you and I are having this conversation, I can give permission and that'll be sufficient for the conversation to be recorded. But since he's not a party to the conversation or to the lecture, it gets kind of murky. But as far as public universities are concerned, just because you're on a public university doesn't give you like public access which is why certain public universities will say, oh, only students can use our grounds for protests or demonstrations or some sort of events, but they won't open it up to the general public. So you can't have like the Westboro Baptist Church show up and start picketing your college.
Okay. I guess one of the things that confuses me is it seems like when a lot of these people like show up to record things, they like if you have the authority to remove somebody from the situation, then you call security or the police, and then you say, hey, get this guy the fuck out of here. But instead you get a lot of these weird scenarios. Did you ever see the one where where that Asian kid was trying to cover I want to say it was another feminist protest or whatever, and the woman said, the woman used that phrase, can I get some muscle over here?
Oh, yeah. So, Melissa Click and all that. Well,
yeah.
So, there's different rules for public officials, and this is where the difference for police come into play.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue that since she's a representative of the college and she's speaking publicly, that she's a public official, at least to some degree. And similarly, if the governor comes to speak at your school, you could tape him because he's a public official speaking in a public place. So there's no expectation of privacy.
I guess what I'm asking is, if this guy is not allowed to record this legally, why didn't she just get the police over to remove him? Why do all this weird kind of bullshit? Because when I see people doing things like stand in front of him or whatever, what goes through my mind is, okay, so you're not legally allowed to remove him, so you're just doing everything you can to try to skirt the law to make him leave, even though you're legally not allowed to. That's what I see. So I guess maybe my impression is wrong, and she would have called the the reporter was also a student.
Yeah. And so that's why he can go in there to begin with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he has the right to record other people's conversations. And the other thing is, from the way that lecture looked, it looked like it was for people who were invited as opposed to everybody come one, come all, because then you would have done it in a more public place.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's arguably a more of a expectation of privacy.
So then why didn't she just have him removed from the place? Why didn't she just call the police or have security actually remove him?
Well, probably because they didn't have security immediately at the time. And the other thing is, a lot of people don't know these sorts of things. You'd be surprised how little people understand about what their rights are, especially when it comes to wiretapping, because every state is different. The state that I'm in is a two-party state. So you have to have both people's permission.
Yeah, I understand. I live in a one-party state, Nebraska. So yeah, I know what you mean. So if I wanted to record a conversation right now between you and me, I could do it, and I wouldn't need to get your consent for it.
Yeah. So it's one of those weird areas. And the other thing is sometimes it's easier to not call the police because who knows what the police are going to do when they show up. They may just say, it's more trouble than it's worth. We're just going to disperse or shut down the event, which being campus police, they'll probably have the right to do if there's sort of a ruckus going on. So
I guess it seems to me if you were in charge of these events, getting the police involved early just seems to be more beneficial for everybody, because if shit starts to grow out of it always seems when these kinds of things get really bad and shit gets out of control, the number one question everybody always seems to ask is, why didn't you call the police earlier instead of waiting for if this would have started to break out into a fight, or if somebody were to start assaulting somebody and police officer there earlier, because I imagine if the police officers are there, they're not just dispersing it because they're bored and lazy. It's probably because they are under the assumption that this event could grow to be something that could become violent.
You would think that, but oftentimes that's not the case. Mostly it's they don't want to have to get to the point where it gets to the point where they would have to disperse it, so it's easier just to shut it down before it becomes an issue. Part of that is because university police always err on the side of caution, and then some of it is also because they're usually one of the most understaffed local police agencies that are going to be there in comparison to the number of people that they're responsible for. So it's a lot, and part of it is also because it's college and it's kids, and so they tell them to go home, and they'll figure out how to deal with it later on. So that's all. I mean, it's meme college stuff. You wouldn't see this out on the street having a normal situation. This is just one of those weird things that you only see really happen in college. It's like the Milo thing, where you have people show up and start making a whole fit and fuss. Most people would sit there and say, hey, there's somebody speaking that I don't like. Okay, I'm just not going to go see him. You know,
Well,
they
like,
wouldn't go
I'd
there
say-
specifically to try and interrupt them.
Yeah, kind of. I feel like I have a really good I feel like I have an adequate understanding of how private property laws work. For instance, in that thing that you just described, if Milo and them had rented out like an auditorium or rented someplace out that was private property, and somebody comes in and do that, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can shout at them. You could get police to just fucking remove them. Like you could literally call the cops and say, "I want this fucker removed from my property," and full stop. Period. And they would come and they would do it because it's private property and that's your right to do whatever the fuck you want with it, right? Short of assaulting someone or whatever, right? But I thought that I thought that the rules for like public stuff were like a little bit more hazy than that, since a lot of it is taxpayer funded and whatnot, and you have. But
So
I guess,
with public land, you always have what's known as the TPM dynamic, which is the time, place, and manner. Which is where they can sit there and be at least a little bit more discerning. Like I mentioned earlier in chat, where colleges can sit there and say, well, we're only opening it up to students, therefore only students can speak. But they do have the right to limit speech. The real thing that they can't do usually is that they can't limit it based on viewpoint. And sometimes they can do it on topic depending on what you're talking about. But yeah, if there's enough of a,
hold on.
I guess you would say,
I don't have much money in my bank account anymore, but wow, Abermuffin. Welcome to the 12-month Subber Clubber. Bogus Mim, Destison Payee.
Wow, good job, Aber. All right, or Abermuffin. Sorry, what's up? Go ahead.
No, there's a lot more power that public places have in limiting the right of speech that people have. So especially if there's any sort of, I don't want to say breach of the peace, that's usually where the cops get in, and that's where also they can sit there and say, well, we require you to have a permit to do certain activities because we want to make sure, as you said, if it's likely to escalate, that we do have police on site to begin with. And that was part of the whole dynamic, I think, of the Westboro Baptist Church memes as far as those court cases were concerned. So,
Gotcha.
and the degree of what is and isn't allowed as far as how specific it gets usually comes down to the individual state. Like some states will just sit there and say, well, we only care about electronic communications, we only care about hidden cameras. Some other states will sit there and say, well, you know, spoken conversations don't count. And like, here's Nebraska. The consent of at least one party to a conversation is required to record an oral communication, which is defined as any oral communication uttered by a person exhibiting an expectation that such communication is not subject to the interception under circumstances justifying such expectation, but do not include electronic communication. So thus, a journalist doesn't need consent to record conversations in public where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. But what constitutes a reasonable expectation of privacy is always up to interpretation. So while you might sit there and say, well, this classroom doesn't count as a reasonable expectation of privacy, someone else might say, yeah, because you could be doing a ad hoc demonstration out on the mall of the university with a megaphone. And so
that whether it's a reasonable expectation, that's something that would get argued in a courtroom, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you were holding like and like I said, this looks like it's kind of like a private invitation sort of lecture. So it's not like it's open to the general public, or it might be a specific classroom where it's specifically open to the students of that class. Therefore, there is a reasonable expectation of privacy, or you might argue that it's not because it's a public lecture. So
Sure. Was there I don't remember if this ever made it to court, but I remember reading, I think this was a long time ago, maybe half a decade or more ago. Wasn't there a big fuss that was made because students were arguing whether or not they had the right to record college lectures, and some teachers would say they absolutely do not allow that, and I don't remember.
Yeah. So part of that is not just a matter of whether or not it was legal from a criminal standpoint. Part of that was actually part of intellectual property issue.
Yeah.
Because the college professor would copyright the content of their lectures.
Sure.
Or would copyright the actual lectures themselves and would record it and then choose to distribute it however they wish. Sometimes they put it as supplemental stuff for their textbooks or otherwise. I know I had a college professor in college who was very clear that he didn't want any of his lectures ever recorded under any circumstances because he was a military history lecturer, and some of the stuff he talked about was not exactly public knowledge, and he didn't want it to get out. But it was important to give context to some of the issues he was talking about and more of the modern military history. So it was like one of those things where I don't want to say there was national security implications, but it was just one of those things that he didn't want to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing and then having it wind up out on the internet. So, yeah. That's where most of the issues with recording college professors usually come from. It's usually something related to what they're working on if they're talking about it and intellectual property surrounding it.
Gotcha. How does the so then to summarize then, colleges are allowed to make their own rules, and even though they're publicly funded, even though I pay for colleges with my real estate taxes, I wouldn't be able to just walk onto a college campus. Like, they could necessarily remove me if they wanted to, and I would have no recourse or whatever, right?
Unless there's a state law overriding their personal rules.
Yeah. Basically, it's all going to depend on the state. Most states are going to sit there and say you have free access to, like, go to the college, but you may not necessarily have access to
Like the
hold an
library.
event there.
Okay, sure. Oh, okay.
And that is legal. They've held that before, where colleges have been able to say we only want students to use our property for holding demonstrations and events, and that's been upheld. The big one that they really can't do is usually viewpoint discrimination or content discrimination, where they sit there and say, oh, you can only talk about pro-abortion, you can't talk about anti-abortion matters. Or if they sit there and say certain topics are just completely off limits. That usually depends on the topic and depends on the nature of what is being discussed, but
Gotcha.
usually that's not allowed either.
Okay, so like, let's say, here's an example. Let's say that I live across the street from a university and my work is right behind it. And let's say that I walk across the university campus every day to get to work, and that's part of my schedule. Let's say that campus security notices me doing it, and they're like, hey, you're not a student here. We really don't want you walking across campus grounds. Even though it's public property, do they have the right to say that and then exclude me from those grounds and I would have to find a different route, or would I be able to walk through?
My campus, they would have the police escort the homeless that would cross the street onto campus to beg for money away.
Yeah,
Sure.
It usually depends on whether or not... It depends on the university's policies. It's also going to depend on the situation. If they're just saying, hey, I'm walking from one place to another, or for instance, like the undergraduate school I went to was in the middle of like two major highways, so people would often cut through campus to get from one highway to the other. Usually they're not going to do anything just because they don't want to start that kind of issue. But if you go onto campus and you, for instance, get into a fight with another student, yeah, then they would have a right to exclude you from the campus and say you're not welcome back anymore because of the issues that you cause when you're here.
Okay, so then it's sounding like then, if you weren't... So I could go right now to UNO's campus, and assuming I wasn't causing any problems, I could just, like, kind of hang out there?
Yeah.
And no one
Especially
would
if
be
you-
able to legally remove me from the premises, assuming... I'm not saying, like, obviously if you show up and start causing trouble. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that in terms of, like, being there publicly. Would I be allowed to just be around that campus publicly without...
Yeah. Pretty much. I wouldn't see why that wouldn't be a problem unless they have some sort of specific policy against it. Like,
Well, that's what I'm asking. Legally, could they make a... Could a state university legally make a policy saying, we do not allow any non-students on this campus, period? If it was a state university.
they're probably not going to make that policy. Theoretically, it would probably be challenged and shot down because, again, as you said, it's public land. And unless they have a really good reason to do it, there's not really a reason to close down something that's opened up to the public otherwise. Because
Okay.
as long as you're a student, you would be allowed there, but anybody could constitute a student. So why would you differentiate between a student and a non-student at that point? It wouldn't make sense.
Say that I live in a one-party state then, and there's some kind of demonstration or whatever going on campus. Would I legally be allowed to walk by and record that? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so then
Well-
the Melissa Click shit, she was 100% entirely in the wrong then, right? Because they were having a pretty public demonstration on public
Yeah.
property.
Well, the other thing is when you're that far out into the public like that, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy, especially when you're like parading about in public for the purposes of making a public demonstration.
Gotcha. And then when Okay, so insofar as how this classroom shit went on this video that we just watched, if they were living in a one-party state, would this guy have had the authority to make this recording without being harassed or whatever? Would he be able to legally do that, or is it not relevant here because this is on at a university and they could make rules saying we don't want certain people? Wouldn't you get into like excluding viewpoints at that point, or?
No, my gut says, like, based on what I just watched, says that he probably wouldn't have the right to record that because he's not quote unquote part of the conversation. He even says it himself. He's just there to record what's going on for the blog. Now, if he were like a member of the classroom and he was trying to record him having the discussion with the teacher, then you would be able to say one party, but one party requires that you actually be a party to the conversation. So if you're just
so like I can't go wiretap you in a one-party state and be like, oh well, I consented for both of these guys to record their conversation.
Exactly. You would have to actually be a part of the conversation. Now, you can give a third party the right to record you in a one-party state, but unless somebody explicitly gave him permission, if he's not part of the conversation, then no, he wouldn't be allowed to do so.
Okay. Okay. So final question. Do you know the privacy stuff regarding the like recording people in their homes? How does that?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to? Are you allowed to point a camera at somebody's like window and record?
No.
If the window's open.
What
about like what? Okay. So like, what about like backyards? You know, some people have privacy fences. Some people have like wire fences. Like, does it make a difference? Are you allowed to record people in their backyard or?
Generally, no. There are all sorts of laws that sit there and say like you're not supposed to disturb people's peace in their home.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not. Basically, if it sounds like it would be creepy, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good common sense thing to do. But I wouldn't, under any circumstances, say that that's a good idea unless you had like permission to do so. Now, if the person says, "Hey, you know, like I'm trying to, you know, reenact something that I did the other day," go ahead and record me. Then
obviously they consent. So I guess then my next question is like, how do all of those tabloid magazines get away with it when they post those kind of racy pictures of people like in their backyard and shit that are obviously being taken without those people's consent?
Well, there have been all sorts of problems with that, and a lot of that comes from the concept of them getting away with it because
they're too legal or lazy to prosecute.
Some of it's too lazy to prosecute. There has been some prosecution of paparazzis for invasion of privacy. There's also in Europe where there's, I guess, less rules to protect people's privacy in their home. Because there was what was the famous picture of like the queen, not the Queen of England, the princess on the boat where I think she had her naked pictures leaked to a tabloid. And that's been one of the issues that's been talked about in California regarding drone usage, where people have been using drones to try and get celebrity shots when they're in their backyard.
Yeah.
And it definitely is an invasion of privacy at the very least. So you probably don't want to do that. And
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
what about, okay, so final question. A lot of times on campus when I was there, you get these really weird people. I know that you were talking about like Westboro Baptist Church stuff wasn't allowed, but there were a lot of times when I was on a college campus or even at UNO, and I would find fundies that were advertising pretty extreme stuff, like signs saying like sinners go to hell and shit.
Yeah,
We're on campus doing that. Do you think that those were all students, or because some of them were pretty old?
Well, it's all going to depend on the campus. I mean, some campuses just sit there and say, hey, we're open to the public, and if people want to use our grounds for demonstrations, they can. I mean, I had them all the same too.
Mm-hmm.
And it all depended on the campus. It usually also depended on how much of a fuss they made. But some of them... The reason why the Westboro Baptist Church has been somewhat so successful with what they've done in the past is because they were very smart in getting themselves all educated as lawyers. Like, all the families are basically law grads or practicing attorneys. So they knew what the limitations were, and they kind of exploited it to their best benefit. So sometimes it is, you know, somebody who really knows the rules well enough that they know how to expose them and exploit them.
Gotcha. Huh. Okay.
So, like, we had churches all around the border, both on the drag and the other side of one of the streets. that they call themselves campus churches, but obviously they weren't
Yeah.
actually directly affiliated with churches. And they were all different denominations and a Catholic mass place and stuff like that. But they would only let them go either there on the drag on the other side of the street or over in the areas where they also let the food vendors.
Gotcha.
So if the food vendors were allowed there, you were allowed there basically.
Sure. Okay, I have one more question. This is completely unrelated, but I hear this on the radio all the time and it bothers me.
Sure.
First degree murder. First degree can happen in an instant, right?
No.
Are you sure? Really?
First degree is usually thought out and planned.
So I'm aware that I thought that the difference was, so growing up, I had always heard that the meme was first degree murder is premeditated, planned out, thought murder, and it's like you plan to kill somebody is first degree murder.
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
growing up, I don't remember if this is on fucking Law and Order SVU or some other fucking show. Or if I read this on the internet, or actually, wait, I think it might have even been that there's a lawyer guy that makes like a comic thing. I was given the impression that first degree murder can actually happen relatively quickly. Like, let's say you're getting into a fight with your wife or something, you go upstairs or whatever, and then you wait an hour, and then you get like a gun, and then you go downstairs and you kill them. That something like that, you could argue could be first degree murder because it's not like in the moment. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be like planned out like meticulously. Like first degree, you could even prove first degree murder in like a matter of minutes, where somebody like leaves the scene, goes to the car, grabs a gun, comes back and fucking kills somebody. You could argue that was first degree murder. Yeah.
So usually the rule of thumb is whether or not the person has had a reasonable amount of time to cool off as to whether or not you get into things like involuntary manslaughter or second degree. And some of this varies by state to state because they'll call the different murders different things or they'll assign different meanings to them. But generally, when you're talking about first degree murder, if you have any ability to act with planning or forethought. So as you said, if you have enough time to think about it and kind of cool off and not immediately react, and you come back an hour later and shoot somebody, that's going to be usually enough time to say that you planned it out, as opposed to like you coming home, finding your wife in bed with another guy, and then just deciding to grab the gun and shoot them immediately.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think that's all I have for now.
Okay.
All right. I love you, buddy. What is your legal specialty? What do you do? What field are you in?
I do mostly business and technology law, and I do a little bit of constitutional law and national security law on the side.
Wow, cool stuff. Okay. Are you a partner at your law firm, or are you just an underling right now?
I'm just an underling right now.
Do you think it's
I'm
because
only
you
a
spend
few
too much of
years
your time watching fucking streams like a slacking piece of shit?
Yup. Or hanging out in TeamSpeak not when I should be working, but when I'm doing all sorts of meme reading.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good luck. I hope you make partner one day. When you make partner, you can let me know by throwing $1,000 my way via donation.
Fair enough.
No, I'm just kidding. All right. I love you. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate the information. I think everybody in chat does too. I love you, buddy.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.